channel, guys, I have bad news. Not a video I want to be doing. Anyway, if you didn't know, I'm currently, and for the last sort of year and a half-ish, been rebuilding my OG Cadillac. You guys may or may not remember, if you're a subscriber from many years ago, I owned a 1966 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. I actually sold it to fund this channel, and subsequently and thankfully the owner sold it back to me a few years ago. Since that day, I got it back. The engine was never right. It had been rebuilt completely terribly by someone that I don't think really knew engines or V8s or how to put them together. The V8 engine in that car just wasn't worth salvaging. So I looked down the route of putting a different engine in there because I wanted the reliability of a dailyable, big, old American 19-foot land yacht, but with a newer engine, maybe a little bit of power in there. We went down the Mark IV Supra route, and today we're pulling it back out. Yeah. Bad times. Anyway, onwards to Advanced Automotive, and I'll chat about what's going on.
Six and a half hours later.
Here we are, Advanced Automotive. Park up. We'll get inside to see what the crack is. Yeah. So, engine, as you can see, is back out. Before anybody starts, I'm not giving up on this car. That's not the idea here. I give up on cars I don't like. I love this car, so I'm not giving up. I did some thinking. You know, as I've already said in this video, there's a couple of things I was sort of not too happy with, mainly because of condition of engine and stuff. We haven't actually started this engine, and we started thinking, you know, what's the best scenario for this car and this engine? What is the best scenario? Well, after this, had a good check over, we had a good chat. I was on the fence about buying all of the pulleys and everything to get this engine nice and startable, because we haven't started it yet. It then dawned on me that maybe the auto box and the auto wiring loom with the manual engine, there might be some plugs, there might be some wires that might not be very happy. The second the wiring, the ECU, because that's where we left this car off with, the wiring, the ECU went into the car, we started finding, not problems, but connectors that wouldn't connect from the auto box and the auto loom into the manual engine and manual loom. Now you might ask yourself, Jamie, why wouldn't you just manual swap it? It's a 19-foot Cadillac. You're not manual swapping that. It is not worth it. That's not the idea of this car. It is a cruiser. So I wanted to keep it an automatic. I want to put an automatic box back in it just for simplicity. Also, I'm super lazy. There is that too, but that was the way we were going. And as we started pulling wiring and as they started checking wiring both sides, it was just looking further and further away to a reality that this would just connect as is because of the manual engine from the Mark IV Supra, the manual engine wiring loom to an automatic GS300 gearbox, an automatic loom coming from the gearbox. Now you could do this with a standalone ECU. That is something that you could do. We have looked it up. Now I'm trying to relay as much as I can on this because of course mechanically minded, it's not really there for me, but I'm trying to keep you guys updated. The standalone ECU, you could do that with the engine. It is not a problem. You see Supras, you see all of this stuff running standalone ECU very easily from the engine part, but working with the GS300 gearbox, so an automatic gearbox, trying to make that connect together, you would probably have to go with either two standalone ECUs or two various ECUs piggybacking off the standard ECUs just to make them connect. Now, the ECUs we started looking at worked out about £4,000. I think everybody out there can probably get on board with how much a standalone ECU is for an engine and gearbox like this. Trying to make them work together was the hardest thing. That is the biggest hurdle here. So I told them the last time I was here, I shot down after we sort of started wiring the car up basically to actually physically start it, start buying all these auxiliary parts to actually get it started. I said, hold on a minute. If the ECU is not going to work, if the ECU from the engine, manual engine, isn't going to work with the automatic gearbox and connectors are completely different, the time, the labour, the amount of money that I'll put in just to get this thing wired and then find out that maybe because this engine has been sat for so long, I mean, look how much dirt, grime, rust is on this engine. Maybe it doesn't even work. Maybe the oil that's been sat in there for years, you know, it's probably 8, nearly even 10 years this engine's been sat. What if we then get to that part and the engine is just not salvageable and it's not actually worth carrying on with this engine? I then said, do you know what, pull it out, we'll have a think, because this is the last thing you want to be doing, trying to wire an engine that has not been proven, has not been started whatsoever in probably 10 years time. I'm gonna say 10 years. That has not been started. What if we wire it all up and the engine's not happy? What happens then? Now, yes, there is going to be comments. There is multiple ways you can get around this. You could buy another engine. You could buy a automatic GS300 engine. You could put standalone ECUs on this. You could go absolutely mad. But price-wise, what's the best scenario for me to actually go down? And the only way I am able to actually do this is by selling this engine. I'm going to sell the manual Mark IV Supra engine as a whole with the engine loom, so that's not the GS300 gearbox and GS300 loom. That can go on its own, but I am actually going to sell this complete setup to anybody out there that wants to maybe strip this down, forge it, because it is a UK manual engine with manual wiring. I feel like someone else could probably get more out of it than I'm going to get in this car. But that puts us in a real bad predicament. If you are interested in buying this, I'm going to put it on Instagram and probably Facebook and stuff. I'm going to sell that setup. Yeah, it means we're going to sell up. Now, this isn't, of course, what I want to do. I want to put this engine in this car, and of course, if you haven't dawned on you yet, the conversation we actually had last week was pull the engine out. We're going to get the GS300. This is one you saw at the start of this video. My daily driver, the one I've absolutely fallen in love with. I've fallen in love with the GS300 platform again. I'm going to sacrifice that car basically to put it into this. I think that's the only way to go, and I will do a full video explaining the differences, because there is a lot of differences between this engine and the engine that's actually in my facelift VVTi GS300. It will make it a lot easier for us to actually put that engine in this car with, you know, the various things we already have, like the sump and stuff is already ready to go. And if anything, we're looking like this. This was the mock-up. This was the engine and the gearbox mock-up for now. We have a proven drivetrain, which is in my GS300 at the moment. The engine, drivetrain, everything electrical works. So we know that that is a full car that could be split apart and put into a different car. It can be easily turboed. It's literally 2 holes in the side of the engine, basically, and we have everything else to turbocharge the 2JZ from that car. And because it's a VVTi car, it has less on the turbo side, so it would actually make life a lot easier for us, and financially the labour costs will be a lot less. Which sounds crazy because, of course, selling this and putting another car in to pull it apart doesn't sound like it's going to be financially viable on my end, but it is actually the better way to go, because this could get very out of control very quickly. It could create this very expensive hole of basically tarting up and getting this engine right for then it to start and not even work. But way before that, standalone ECUs, trying to work out the wiring, trying to connect everything. It is doable, don't get me wrong, but we're going to be here for months and months chasing wires, cutting off connectors, getting standalone ECUs, then to find out the engine doesn't even work. If anything, the biggest positive here is that we actually had everything in bar wiring, because that's what, you know, we got to, and it just wasn't going to work. So everything engine wise, as in as it sits, it's clocked properly, prop shaft, lines, everything for cooling, just everything was ready to go. So if anything, this will actually be a lot faster, this part of the build, because if we get a running engine, it means everything's already done. I will say, as we sort of end this video, my intention of owning this GS300 wasn't actually to pull it apart. I don't actually want to do it because I'm genuinely emotionally attached to this car. It sounds the silliest thing, but I've done good miles in it, taken the family out. We've done so much in this car, and although I've only owned it for a couple of months, it sounds so silly for me to say this, but it's regained my love for the Lexus brand 100%. and the Japanese saloon luxury division, you would call it. I just absolutely love Japanese luxury cars, and to jump in one and daily drive one after owning all these other silly cars, it still just reminds me how good these cars are, and it actually slightly breaks my heart that I have to do this, but there's no other way of me really going down this route. This car doesn't owe me crazy amount of money, and if anything, it might push me into a nicer GS300 with maybe lower mileage, or we go and get a Mark III again. I will be on the hunt though, and I will say this now in this video, for another daily driver, because of course this is my daily driver. I wanted to do trips in it. The whole idea of this car was actually to lower it, body kit, wheels, all this sort of stuff, aesthetic looking really, really nice. But if I can use the heart of this car and the drivetrain and everything in another project, then chances are it's probably going to be the right thing to do financially as well, because I can take the money that I was going to spend on that engine and go and buy another car for you guys to watch and we build. Maybe as a street car, maybe as, you know, something else that's nice aesthetic looking, rather than going down this crazy route of trying to pay for a rusty old engine to be made nice when I've got one sat in front of me. It's the hardest thing I've recently had to think about, is how I'm actually going to juggle the idea of doing that and doing this, and the financial idea of getting that engine as I want it to be. And then it slightly dawned on me that I already had the answer and I was driving it round. So it does mean that I will be after probably another GS300, because I love this platform. I do have a few people that I want to work with on this platform and the Mark III platform, so it's something that I would probably want to go down the route of getting again. So if you're after selling your GS300, hit me up, give me a shout on Instagram. I'm after one again.